I never imagined I'd cause a stir at my son's graduation. Life sure has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? There I was, looking a mess, when every guest was shocked by what a young man said into the microphone. I'm Amber, 40 years old, and I've had to be strong, determined, and humble all at once. Let me tell you, raising my son Mark alone hasn't been a walk in the park. I lost my husband when I was pregnant, and it's been one challenge after another ever since. Mark's father passed away from stomach cancer far too soon, leaving us to face this harsh world alone. Since then, I've been selling sweets on the busy streets of a town that reminds me of Santa Cruz, trying to make ends meet without any help. Every day is a battle from sunrise to sunset, and I'm not exaggerating one bit. I get up before the crack of dawn, when it's still dark outside, to make sweets. Each piece is like a little part of my soul, filled with all my hard work and hopes. While I'm mixing ingredients, my mind is always on Mark. That boy, bless his heart, understands how hard things are for us, even at his young age. He tries his best to help me out however he can. Every morning, he begs me to let him help make sweets that day. I always smile and tell him he needs to go to school. But he's stubborn, just like kids his age can be. He insists that I need him and that he can sell them after school. While he's saying this, he's already helping me wrap the sweets. I whisper to him that he's my angel and doesn't need to help, that he should focus on his studies. I know education is the key to a better future, and that's what I want so badly for him. As I watch him, my heart swells with a mixture of pride and worry, like a balloon ready to burst. The weight of our struggles sits heavy on my shoulders, like an invisible backpack filled with stones. Sometimes, in the quiet moments of work, I find myself transported back to happier times when Mark's father was still with us. The bittersweet memories wash over me like waves on a beach, leaving behind a residue of both joy and sorrow. I look at my hands, rough from work but still capable, and I'm reminded of my own mother's hands, how they never stopped moving, always busy providing for us. The circle of life, they say, but sometimes it feels more like a treadmill, always moving but never quite getting ahead. Yet, when I see Mark's determination, his willingness to help despite his youth, I feel a spark of hope ignite within me. It's like a small flame, flickering but persistent, pushing back the darkness of our circumstances. I know every mother watching this will understand the fierce love and protective instinct that drives us to do whatever it takes for our children. It's a universal language, spoken in sleepless nights and worry-filled days, in small sacrifices and big dreams. As I stand here, covered in sugar and sweat, I make a silent promise to myself and to Mark. We will overcome this, one candy, one day, one small victory at a time. Our story isn't over yet, and I'll be darned if it doesn't have a sweet ending.
Mark attended an elite private school on a scholarship, driven by a strong desire to succeed in life. Despite his sharp intellect and determination, Mark faced daily challenges of not fitting in with his classmates' social circles. One afternoon, while waiting for class to begin, a classmate named Jared approached Mark. Jared was an arrogant boy from a wealthy family. "Hey Mark, why are you still using that old cell phone? Can't you afford a new one?" Jared taunted with a smug smile. Mark felt his face flush, but kept his cool. He replied, "It's not about money, Jared. My phone works perfectly for what I need." Later, another classmate, Sebastian, joined in the teasing. Sebastian was a spoiled child who always got what he wanted. "Mark, why are you still studying with that small, outdated tablet? Can't you buy a bigger, more modern one?" Sebastian asked with a sarcastic grin. Mark felt a pang in his chest but stood his ground. He answered, "My tablet may not be the latest, but it serves me well. I'm more interested in what I do with it than showing it off." Sebastian shot Mark a contemptuous look. clearly surprised by his classmate's resolute response. "Ah, look who's trying to act tough. But we all know you're just a poor kid pretending to be something you're not. Your family must be really struggling to keep you in this school," Sebastian sneered, his voice echoing in the hallway. "Think what you want, Sebastian. But my family is wonderful, and they're doing everything they can to give me the best opportunities. I'll never be ashamed of that," Mark replied, his voice firm and determined. Sebastian frowned, the contempt in his eyes briefly flickering to confusion. "You're really hopeless, Mark. You'll never understand what it's like to have the best things in life. But don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows what a loser you are," Sebastian said with a nasty smile. As Sebastian walked away, Mark felt a mix of relief and indignation. He knew Sebastian's words weren't true, but they still stung. Mark took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. He forced himself to keep his composure and walked steadily to the bathroom. But inside, he was falling apart. Once in the bathroom, he entered a stall and finally let the tears flow. Leaning against the cold wall, he cried quietly, "It's tough now, but I have to be strong. I'll finish school and go to a business grad school. I'll become a successful professional to repay Mom for everything she does. I'll make all these hardships worth it. I promise, Mom," Mark whispered to himself. He stayed in the bathroom for a while, then wiped his tears. Taking a deep breath, he looked at his blurry reflection in the mirror and said, "Keep moving forward." With that resolve, he left the bathroom and headed to class. After school, Mark walked to the street where his mother was selling sweets.
I was selling sweets on the familiar streets of our town as usual. That's when I saw my son Mark approaching. The heaviness in his steps made my heart clench with anxiety. When he whispered, "Mom," and gently kissed my forehead, I sensed the sadness hidden in his voice. I asked how his classes were that day, but something lurking in the depths of his eyes triggered my maternal instinct. Worried and with an aching heart, I asked if he had been crying. My voice was on the verge of trembling. Mark lied, saying it was just allergies, and forced a smile. That fake smile nearly shattered my heart. Realizing he didn't want to worry me with his problems, tears welled up in my eyes at his kindness. My son was trying to protect me even though he was hurting. This role reversal filled me with a complex mix of helplessness and pride. Mark tried to change the subject. His attempt reminded me of when he was little, filling me with nostalgia and a twinge of sadness. As I listened to him talk about 3 tests and an unfinished science project, I felt the pressure on his shoulders as if it were my own burden. Understanding his struggles, yet wishing for him to stay positive, I encouraged him that all his efforts would pay off. As I told him he was building his future step by step, I felt myself being encouraged by those words too. My words seemed to lift his spirits, but seeing the worry still in his eyes, I felt frustrated, wishing I could do more. When Mark confessed he was worried about maintaining his pace, my heart wavered with his anxiety. I tried to infuse strength into my voice as I looked at him with determined eyes. As I called him my beloved child and praising his strength and abilities, I deeply felt the truth of those words. As I urged him to cherish opportunities for learning and growth, I keenly realized I was learning from these difficult days too. When I told him failure was a step towards success, I thought our lives as parent and child were proof of that. Expressing my trust in him, I felt new hope budding within me as well. When Mark expressed his gratitude, tears almost came to my eyes. Seeing his smile, my heart filled with joy and pride, believing we could overcome any difficulty.
Mark rarely spoke about his family at school. He seldom mentioned his mother's name among his classmates and teachers. The boy was reserved both at school and at home. While not ashamed of Amber or her tough job selling sweets on the streets to support them, Mark was driven by a deep fear that his mother might become an object of humiliation or pity. He felt these emotions were unworthy of the woman he deeply respected. This concern led to his self-imposed silence about family life at school. One sunny afternoon, Sebastian approached with a provocative smile. Malicious curiosity gleamed in his eyes. "Hey, Mark, I've always wanted to ask. You never talk about your family. Who are they? What do they do?" The question seemed simple, but the intent behind it was far from pure. Mark replied, "Honestly, I don't think there's any need to discuss my private life here. What matters is what happens inside the school, not outside." His gaze was direct and challenging, attempting to block Sebastian's intrusion into his privacy. Sebastian pressed on. "Come on, Mark. It's just a simple question. You act like you've got some big secret. Everyone else here talks about their families. Why are you different?" At that moment, Jared joined the conversation, seemingly intrigued. "We're trying to learn more about your mysterious family here, Mark. You seem to think your life is an episode of some TV drama." Jared joked, trying to provoke a reaction from Mark. Mark maintained his composure and responded, "As I told Sebastian, I don't see any reason to discuss my family life here. What my family does or doesn't do isn't the business of anyone at this school. Aren't we here to study? Let's focus on that." There was an air of mystery surrounding Mark's life outside of school. Classmates and teachers knew only the basics. He was a young man from a humble background with sharp intelligence and unwavering determination. During a break, teachers gathered and discussed Mark's academic and personal excellence. They emphasized his beyond his years understanding and how it enriched class discussions. Moreover, Mark's determination was evident. He was an example of how talent and resolve could overcome adversity, even without the same material resources as other students. It was a reminder of the true purpose of education. Sebastian and Jared happened to pass by and overheard the conversation. Jared spoke with a voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, sure. Teacher's pet. Bet. He only gets good grades because the teachers feel sorry for his situation." Sebastian was quick to add malice, following up on Jared's comment. "That's right. He's not smarter than us. It's all about pity. He's just playing the poor boy act and fooling everyone." Jared and Sebastian were driven by poorly concealed jealousy. Despite their privileged circumstances, they couldn't achieve what Mark had. Unable to match Mark's academic performance, it fueled their attempts to diminish his worth. However, Mark's qualities were undeniable. There was a reason for this. Amber, his mother, even after long hours of work selling sweets on the streets of their town, found the strength to encourage Mark to focus on his studies.
"I never thought I'd be sitting here, sharing a simple meal with my son Mark, feeling both proud and worried at the same time. As I looked at him, my heart swelled with love, and I said, 'Mark, my son, I can see how hard you're working. It fills my heart with joy.' I wanted him to understand the power of knowledge, so I added, 'Never forget, knowledge is the most powerful tool you can possess. No one can ever take it away from you.'" Mark's response warmed my heart. He promised to make the most of every opportunity to learn and grow, wanting to make me proud. I felt a lump in my throat as I told him I was already so proud of him. My mind wandered to my own missed opportunities, and I found myself saying, "I want you to have the chances I never had." A good education can open doors we can't even imagine. I could see the future stretching out before him, bright and full of possibility. "Every hour you study, every book you read, you're paving the way to a brighter future," I told him, my voice filled with hope and determination. The next morning, as Mark prepared for school, I held him tight, whispering words of encouragement. I told him to make today another step closer to his dreams, reminding him that I was here, supporting his every move. His words of gratitude and love nearly brought me to tears. He promised to study hard, to repay me for everything I do for him. As I watched him leave for school, my heart was full of love and pride. After he left, I made my way to the street where I sell my sweets. Setting up my stand, I greeted the other vendors with a nod and a small smile, carefully arranging my sweets to look as appealing as possible. It wasn't long before the first customers of the day approached, drawn by the sweet aroma from my stand. I offered my sweets with a gentle voice, always maintaining a kind demeanor regardless of the response. While many customers greeted me with smiles and gratitude, sometimes I faced unkind individuals. Some looked at me with disdain, questioning if I could expect to sell anything with my appearance, suggesting I should be begging instead of selling sweets. Others criticized my calloused hands, implying they would drive customers away. I maintained an unwavering composure, calmly responding that the quality and care of my sweets were not affected by my appearance. On a particularly hot spring day, 2 teenagers suddenly approached my stand. I didn't know it then, but they were Jared and Sebastian, Mark's schoolmates. With the arrogance of those who've never faced real hardship in life, they began to taunt me. Sebastian's words cut deep, questioning if I really thought I could make something of my life selling sweets. Jared joined in the mockery, boasting about their wealth and predicting I'd never escape this miserable life. Hearing these cruel words from boys the same age as my son, I felt a pain in my heart. I wondered why these privileged young men lacked such empathy and kindness. But I refused to be intimidated. I told them we all have our own struggles and dreams, hoping they'd one day understand the value of work and respect for others. The boys were momentarily stunned by my thoughtful response. As they left, I was left alone with my thoughts, undeterred by the unpleasant encounter. That evening, as I prepared dinner, I decided to talk to Mark about his school life. I started the conversation gently, asking if he'd had any problems at school recently. Mark hesitated, and I could sense there was something he wasn't sharing. I reminded him he could always talk to me, that we'd get through anything together, just as we always had. He looked down at his plate, a mix of gratitude and guilt on his face. He insisted everything was fine, just tired from studying. I didn't push him, but I made sure he knew I was always there if he needed me. As I watched him that night, I couldn't help but worry about what he might be facing at school. But I also felt a surge of determination. No matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together, with love, strength, and the power of education.
As the evening settled in, Mark retreated to his room, lost in thought. A sense of guilt washed over him for not telling his mother the whole truth. Alone in his room, surrounded by books and notes spread across his desk, Mark took a moment for reflection. Just a few more months, he whispered to himself, trying to find solace in the countdown to the end of his academic journey. Graduation wasn't just the end of one cycle, it promised a new beginning, away from the taunts and social pressures of school. Mark made a silent vow to do everything he could for his mother. For now, he decided to shield her from unnecessary worry and pain. Just until graduation, he promised himself. He was aware that afterward, there would be a chance to forge a new path and create a different reality for both of them. "I'll endure this for her," he said to himself with firm resolve. This inner strength was nurtured by his love for his mother and his desire to repay her for all she had done. It was what kept him going, preparing him to face the world outside, day by day, until he could finally provide the future Amber deserved. In this small town reminiscent of Santa Cruz, the bond between mother and son was a beacon of hope in challenging times. Mark's determination to create a better life was a testament to the values Amber had instilled in him. As he sat there, surrounded by the tools of his education, Mark couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and anxiety about the future. He knew that each day brought him closer to his goals, but also presented new challenges to overcome. The weight of his responsibilities and dreams sat heavily on his young shoulders, much like the textbooks piled high on his desk. Yet, with every page turned and every problem solved, he was building the foundation for a brighter tomorrow. In the quiet of his room, Mark could almost hear his mother's encouraging words, spurring him on even when the path seemed daunting. It was this invisible thread of love and support that connected them, stronger than any hardship they faced. As the night deepened, Mark returned to his studies with renewed vigor, each line he read bringing him one step closer to the future he and his mother deserved.
The long-awaited day has finally arrived. My son Mark's graduation, a major milestone in our lives. Seeing Mark wake up early, a mix of nervousness and excitement, my heart raced too. Knowing he was chosen as the valedictorian, my chest swelled with pride. As if it were yesterday, I can see the image of Mark when he was little. Watching him carefully choose his suit and get ready, tears welled up in my eyes. As we said our final goodbyes in the living room, there was an unspoken understanding between us. When he said he was going ahead to prepare for the ceremony, I could hear the hope and tension in his voice. I smiled and told him I believed he would do wonderfully. After my son left, I started my own preparations. I gazed at the white lace dress I had bought with money saved for months by giving up small luxuries like coffee and magazines, feeling emotional. I never could have imagined myself wearing this dress with wine-colored high heels before. As I got dressed, my heart pounded imagining Mark at the ceremony. On my way to the beauty salon, my heart was full of mixed emotions of hope and anxiety. Sitting in the stylist's chair, enjoying this rare luxury, I felt as if I were in a dream. I realized this day would be a turning point in our lives, the beginning of a new chapter. Looking at myself in the mirror, I couldn't hide my surprise. There stood not a sweet vendor from the streets of Santa Cruz, but a proud mother about to witness her moment of glory. As I began walking towards the venue, my heart was beating loudly. Each step felt like a countdown to seeing my son's shining moment. Thinking that all our efforts and sacrifices would be rewarded in this moment, I felt a lump in my throat. I am a proud mother, supporting my son's future and celebrating his success. I never expected this to happen on such a special day. My heart was soaring with pride, light as a feather, as I made my way to my son's graduation. But then, like storm clouds suddenly darkening a bright sky, I saw them, Sebastian and Jared. Even in my transformed state, dolled up in my Sunday best, they recognized me instantly. Well, where are you off to looking so fancy?" Sebastian sneered. His smile was a knife's edge, sharp with malice. Jared chimed in, his words dripping with venom, "You didn't steal that dress, did you?"
Yeah,
He pressed on, hard to believe a street peddler could look so glamorous. "Must be some kind of trick, or you lifted it from someone, right?" Their accusations stung like acid on my skin, burning away at my joy. But I stood tall, drawing strength from deep within, like an old oak tree weathering a storm. Looking them straight in the eye, I said with all the dignity I could muster, "You're making a big mistake. I haven't stolen from anyone or tricked a soul. I'm here today because I've worked my fingers to the bone for this special moment." Sebastian tried to regain his mocking tone, muttering about how no one would believe my story of honest work. Jared, equally flustered, could only add a weak, "This isn't over." They tried to look unmoved, but I could see my words had cracked their armor of contempt. "Your judgment doesn't define who I am or the value of what I'm celebrating today," I declared, my voice steady as a rock. As I turned to leave, determined not to let their negativity tarnish this precious day, they weren't done with me yet. They came at me again, like wolves circling their prey, intent on their cruelty. Wait, you think you're just gonna walk away from this? Jared taunted. Sebastian jumped in, we don't believe for a second that someone like you could look like this without doing something wrong.
Yeah.
He added, his words as cold as winter frost. People like you don't change overnight, you must have done something terrible to someone and we think you should pay for it. I stopped in my tracks and faced them once more, my eyes blazing with determination and courage. The fire of a mother's love burned in my chest, giving me strength I never knew I had. The only mistake here, I said, my voice ringing clear as a bell, is believing a person's worth is measured by their appearance or bank account. I owe nothing to anyone except my son. And it's for him that I'm here today, dressed in my finest to celebrate his achievement. My voice swelled with pride as I delivered the final blow. Today is my son's graduation. Now let me pass. I have far more important things to attend to. With that, I turned on my heel and strode towards the school, my head held high.
Sebastian and Jared exchanged confused glances, still unwilling to admit defeat despite their puzzlement at Amber's response. She's heading to our school, Jared whispered to Sebastian, his voice now a mix of curiosity and skepticism. What's a sweet vendor going to do there? Something doesn't add up. Sebastian, still trying to maintain his air of superiority, replied scornfully, of course, something doesn't add up. She must be trying to pull a fast one on someone. There's no way she has a son at our school. It's got to be some kind of scam. Or maybe she's just lost her marbles. He continued, we can't allow outsiders into our circle, especially not at a classy event like our graduation. Our school has certain standards to uphold, you know. Jared agreed. You're right, but how do we stop her? Should we just tell her to scram? He asked, his voice revealing a hesitation that wasn't there before. Sebastian looked around and spotted some city workers finishing up a pothole repair in front of the school. There was a bit of mud nearby. With determination, he approached and kicked a bucket towards Amber. Caught off guard, Amber lost her balance in her high heels and fell into the muddy puddle.
It was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. My son's graduation, my heart was swelling with joy. But God sometimes gives us cruel tests. With mud and tears streaming down my face, I looked up to the heavens. Why this? What have I done? Sebastian's words lashed at me like a whip. Calling me a fraud, saying this was my punishment. Jared spoke coldly too. Saying their graduation was about to start, and I'd been chastised enough. Watching them enter the school, I remained seated out front. My dress muddy, my pride in tatters. Feeling beaten down, I considered my options. Going home and missing Mark's big moment was unthinkable. So, I resolved to face this situation. Rising on shaky legs, I entered the school. Choosing an inconspicuous spot, I sat down, trying to make myself small. Hoping to go unnoticed, to avoid further humiliation. As the ceremony progressed, my eyes followed Mark. He was searching for me in the audience. When he found me, I saw his expression freeze. I must have looked like a shadow of myself, disheveled. With a trembling voice, I explained how the students from this school had insulted me, not for the first time, but worse today. I just wanted to be here for you, on this important day. Overcome with emotion, my words faltered. Mark wanted to know who was responsible. Hesitantly, I pointed out Sebastian and Jared. Seeing anger flare in Mark's eyes, I feared. Calm down, I pleaded, but his resolve was firm. He left my side and headed for the podium. I watched with bated breath, wondering what would happen. When Mark's voice rang out across the hall, my heart pounded. He set aside his prepared speech. And then, the unexpected unfolded. Mark called my name, inviting me to the stage. I hesitated, trapped by my wounded pride and fear. But urged on by my son's determined gaze and the audience's encouragement, I rose on trembling legs. Step by step, I made my way to my son's side. His hand grasped mine, pulling me close. And he began to speak, holding my hand tightly. His words washed over me like a warm summer rain, each syllable a testament to the journey we'd shared. Tonight, he said, I stand before you not just as the class speaker, but as the son of an extraordinary woman, my mother, Amber. My heart swelled with pride, threatening to burst from my chest like a caged bird finally set free. Mark paused, his eyes finding mine in the sea of faces, a look of love so pure it took my breath away. He spoke of our struggles, of the days I'd venture out to sell sweets on the streets, rain or shine, my determination as unyielding as the rocky coast against the relentless sea. I could almost feel the weight of those days on my shoulders again, the ache in my feet, the worry lines etching themselves deeper into my face with each passing year. But oh, how it had all been worth it for this moment, for my boy standing tall and proud before his peers. Mark's voice took on a new tone, serious as a judge's gavel, as he recounted the incident before the ceremony. My cheeks burned with the memory of the insults hurled at me by his classmates, shame and anger warring within me like two prize-fighters in a ring. He spoke of his own experiences with ridicule, of the silent burden he'd carried all these years. I wanted to reach out, to hold him close as I had when he was small, to shield him from the cruel words and judgmental stares. The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension thick as molasses as Mark named Sebastian and Jared as the culprits. I could feel the weight of accusing eyes upon the two boys, could almost hear their hearts racing in fear and shame. Mark turned to me then, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Mom," he said, his voice as tender as a lullaby, "you are my inspiration." He spoke of sacrifices made, of tears shed and smiles shared, each word a balm to my weary soul. "I promise you," he vowed, "all your efforts will bear fruit." In that moment, I felt as though I could fly, my spirit soaring higher than any eagle. Mark concluded his speech with these words, "Today, I ask for a moment of reflection on who we want to be and what kind of community we want to build. A community that stands up against injustice and supports one another. No one should be insulted. I speak these words because I want to fight for and advocate for people in difficult situations like what my mother and I have experienced."
Mark's speech deeply moved everyone in attendance. People rose to their feet, applauding enthusiastically, many with tears in their eyes, touched by the son's heartfelt tribute to his warrior mother. The emotion was palpable throughout the room. The respect for Mark and Amber was immeasurable. Amidst the applause, touching comments could be heard from the audience. "I've never heard such beautiful and sincere words from a son to his mother. It's truly moving. This young man is an example of gratitude and love," said one lady. "Mark has inspired me to want to be a better person. The way he spoke about his mother, that's courage and true love," a young person said. Even those who didn't personally know Mark and Amber were touched. "Wow, that boy and his mother's story. It shows the power of family, the power of love. I'm really moved. They deserve all the success in the world," said a visitor who had come to attend their nephew's graduation. However, this speech wasn't welcomed by everyone. Sebastian and Jared's families remained seated. Their hands were still, and their faces showed deep shame. The pride and joy that should have accompanied the graduation celebration was replaced by feelings of bewilderment at their son's actions. After the speech, as people gathered to talk, Sebastian and Jared's behavior became the focus of much discussion. How could children from good families become so cruel? Was the question on many people's minds. They were trying to understand the gap between the education received at home and the behavior at school. Mark's revelation not only exposed the cruelty of their actions, but also prompted a broader reflection on the values taught and practiced within the community. Sebastian and Jared's parents felt the weight of expectations as they heard whispers and implicit criticism. They slumped in their seats. They had invested in the best schools and provided every opportunity. Yet somehow they had failed to convey that all people must be respected, regardless of economic or social circumstances. Regarding Sebastian's unacceptable behavior, his parents expressed deep disappointment, emphasizing how far his actions had strayed from the family values they had taught. The gravity of his mistake resulted in the loss of the car promised as a graduation gift and new responsibilities to cover his own expenses, marking the beginning of an important lesson about the value of money and respect. Sebastian's attempts at apology were quickly rejected by his parents, emphasizing the need for him to learn from mistakes and treat all people with dignity. The ride home became a time of quiet reflection, with Sebastian beginning to seriously understand the gravity of his choices. Jared also received a lesson from his parents. They expressed their disappointment and shame at his behavior on graduation night, mentioning the numerous phone calls from angry parents and acknowledging that they shared those feelings. They recognized the lack of education about respect and empathy, and consequences were imposed for Jared's actions. The cancellation of the trip to Europe, the end of his allowance, and the requirement to start working in the family factory were demanded. This job was presented not as a punishment, but as an opportunity for growth and learning about the value of hard work and the consequences of choices. It was hoped that Jared would reflect and learn from his mistakes. 1 month after graduation, Sebastian and Jared experienced an unexpected event. They both received notices from the court. Mark had hired a lawyer and initiated legal action against the two young men. News of the legal proceedings spread quickly, reigniting discussions about the consequences of their actions and the importance of personal responsibility. Sebastian felt fear upon receiving the notice. Sitting in the living room with the notice in his hands, he muttered to himself, "This is really happening." Jared faced a similar situation. "Now, this is a big problem," he finally said.
As I sat in the courtroom, my hands trembled like leaves in an autumn breeze. The tension was as thick as the fog that used to roll in off the bay on those early mornings when I'd set up my sweet stand. All around us, people filled the room, families, curious onlookers, their faces a mix of anticipation and unease. It reminded me of waiting for test results at the doctor's office, that same knot of dread and hope tangled in my stomach. Mark sat beside me, his presence as comforting as a warm quilt on a cold night. I tried to keep my composure, but my eyes kept darting between my son and those two young men who had caused us so much pain. Part of me wanted to find forgiveness, to let go of this burden like releasing a bird from a cage. But another part of me, the wounded mother bear, wanted justice to be served. Sebastian and Jared shuffled in, looking as gloomy as a rainy Monday. They sat across the room, avoiding our eyes like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. When the judge opened the proceedings, the silence fell heavier than a church bell's toll. Mark's lawyer began to speak, his words painting a vivid picture of that fateful day. He spoke of respect, dignity, and protection from abuse, values as fundamental as the ground beneath our feet. As he described the cruel act committed by Sebastian and Jared, I felt the sting of that moment all over again. It was like reopening an old wound, the pain as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. The lawyer's voice grew stronger as he emphasized that this wasn't just about us. This case, he said, touched on the very fabric of our society. I found myself nodding, thinking of all the times I'd seen others treated unjustly over the years. How many times had I wished someone would stand up and say, "This is not right." Now, here we were, doing just that. As the lawyer continued, I felt a glimmer of hope, like the first ray of sunshine after a long, dark night. Maybe, just maybe, our pain could lead to something positive. Perhaps it could be a turning point, not just for us, but for our community. I squeezed Mark's hand, feeling a surge of pride for the man he had become. Whatever the outcome, I knew we were doing the right thing. We were standing up for what we believed in, just as I had taught him all those years ago. And in that moment, I felt stronger than I ever had before. As the lawyer paused, I held my breath, feeling like a tightrope walker suspended between hope and fear. He continued, his words painting a picture of a pattern, not just isolated incidents. I couldn't help but think of all the times I'd seen that lack of respect, that disregard for basic decency, like weeds choking out a garden. This wasn't just about us anymore, he said, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was about our community, about drawing a line in the sand and saying, no more. I thought of my own youth, of the times I'd wished someone had stood up for me. The lawyer looked directly at the judge, his voice as steady as a lighthouse beam in a storm. He asked for more than just punishment, he asked for a message to be sent. I squeezed Mark's hand, feeling a surge of pride and determination. This was about dignity and respect, values I'd tried to instill in Mark since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. As the defense lawyer stood up, I braced myself, like preparing for a strong wind. He started talking about Sebastian and Jared, painting them as just foolish boys. My heart clenched, remembering the pain their foolishness had caused. He spoke of youthful lack of judgment, as if that excused everything. I thought of Mark at their age, how he'd never dream of treating anyone that way. The lawyer went on about immaturity and impulsive behavior. I wanted to stand up and shout, being young doesn't give you the right to hurt others. But I held my tongue, remembering all the times I'd told Mark that patience was a virtue. The defense lawyer finished by asking the judge to see them as young men who'd made a mistake. I looked at Sebastian and Jared, trying to see them through his eyes. Part of me wanted to forgive, to let go of this burden like releasing a bird from a cage. But another part, the mother bear who had protected Mark all these years, wanted justice. I closed my eyes, feeling torn between compassion and the need for accountability. In that moment, I realized this trial was about more than just us. It was about what kind of community we wanted to be, what values we held dear. As I opened my eyes, I felt a new resolve settling over me like a warm blanket. Whatever the outcome, we were standing up for what was right. And in doing so, we were already changing things, one small step at a time. As the judge began to speak, I felt my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. His voice, clear and authoritative, filled the courtroom like a church organ on Sunday morning. I held my breath, feeling like I was balanced on a knife's edge, between hope and fear. The judge acknowledged the impulsive nature of youth, but his words carried a weight of responsibility that made me sit up straighter. He said the actions against Mark and me weren't just foolish pranks, but something that caused real harm. I thought back to that day, the humiliation burning in my cheeks like a hot iron. When he announced the sentence, 6 months in jail and monetary compensation, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me like a tidal wave. Part of me felt relieved, like a heavy backpack had been lifted off my shoulders after a long hike. Another part felt a twinge of sadness for those young men, remembering they were someone's children too. As we left the courtroom, I could almost feel the burden lifting with each step, like shedding layers of winter clothing in spring. Mark looked at me, his smile as bright as a sunrise after a stormy night. He said that justice had been served, that no one would insult us again. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief and gratitude. I told him he'd shown me that we should always fight for what's right, no matter how hard it seems. Mark's voice was filled with determination, strong as an oak tree that's weathered many storms. He said we deserved respect and to live without fear. I marveled at how much he'd grown, like a sapling that had suddenly become a mighty tree. I told him his father would be just as proud as I was. As we headed home, I felt a sense of relief and satisfaction, like the feeling after finishing a difficult puzzle. We had fought not just for ourselves, but for all those who had suffered injustice and never had the chance to defend themselves. In that moment, I realized that sometimes, standing up for what's right can change more than just our own lives. It can send ripples through a community, like a stone thrown into a still pond. And as we walked away from the courthouse, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future, bright as the morning sun breaking through the clouds after a long, dark night.
Let me narrate for you the somber reality that Sebastian and Jared now faced. The two young men were taken to prison, where they found themselves sharing the same small cell. This cramped and uncomfortable space would be their entire world for the next 6 months. What initially seemed like a short sentence quickly began to feel like an eternity. Each day passed slowly, colored by the weight of regret and the harsh realities of prison life. In their cell, Sebastian and Jared's conversations often revolved around their mistakes. "I'd give anything to turn back time and do things differently," Sebastian confessed in a moment of vulnerability, his words echoing off the cold cell walls. Jared nodded, sharing the sentiment. "We were such fools," he said quietly, grappling with guilt. "We thought we were invincible, that our actions wouldn't have consequences. Boy, were we wrong. Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" Sebastian asked, referring to Mark and Amber, his voice heavy with uncertainty. The thought of facing those they had hurt, even if only in their minds, was always a source of anguish. Jared sighed, not knowing the answer. "I don't know, but I do know that when we get out of here, we've got to do everything we can to make amends for our mistakes. We need to show that we've learned something from this experience." Sebastian asked, "Remember graduation day? We were so cruel." His voice was filled with regret. Jared stared at the floor, haunted by the memory of that day. "Yeah, I remember. What we did was terrible. I can't believe we thought it was just a joke," he replied. "We humiliated Amber in front of everyone and ruined one of the most important days of Mark's life. And for what? To make ourselves feel superior? It was such a terrible mistake," Sebastian said. Jared agreed. "Let me tell you about a conversation between Sebastian and Jared in their prison cell. If I could turn back time and change what we did, I'd give anything. But now, all we can do is learn from this and try to make amends somehow," Jared said. Sebastian added, "They didn't deserve what we did to them. No one should be treated like that. We need to apologize somehow. We need to show that we truly regret our actions." Jared nodded. "You're right. When we get out of here, that'll be our chance to show we've changed. We need to prove we're not the same boys who entered this cell, that we can be better people," he said. This dialogue in prison marked the beginning of a profound change in both Sebastian and Jared. They began to recognize their cruelty, acknowledge their actions on graduation day and the serious mistakes they had made, and understand the importance of taking responsibility for their behavior and the power of repentance and change. After serving their 6-month sentence, Sebastian and Jared were determined to begin repairing the damage caused by their past actions. One of the first things they decided to do was to offer a sincere apology to Amber. Upon inquiry, they learned that Amber had stopped selling sweets on the street and, with Mark's help, now owned her own cafe. When they asked to speak with Amber, they were shown to her office. There, they found Amber busy with paperwork, but she greeted them with surprising calmness. "We've come to apologize for everything we did. We understand how terribly wrong we were, and we deeply regret our actions." Sebastian began with a trembling voice. Jared took a deep breath and said, Miss Amber, what happened was inexcusable. I'm here to humbly ask for your forgiveness. We're truly sorry for all the pain we caused. Please accept our heartfelt apology.
As I sat in my office, the silence hung heavy like an old quilt, until I finally found the courage to speak. I told Sebastian and Jared that their actions had been painful, not just for me, but especially for Mark. My voice trembled slightly, like a leaf in a gentle breeze, as I expressed my belief in people's ability to change. I said that if their remorse was genuine, I could find it in my heart to forgive them. Just then, as if on cue in a play I didn't know I was part of, Mark burst into the office. His face, when he saw Sebastian and Jared, was a canvas of surprise and instant defensiveness. I could almost see the walls going up around him, like a fortress preparing for siege. He demanded to know what was happening, his voice sharp with concern for me. Sebastian quickly jumped in, his words tumbling out like water over rocks in a stream. He explained they were there to apologize, to both me and now to Mark as well. I watched Mark's face carefully, seeing the skepticism etched in every line. But as Sebastian spoke of taking full responsibility, I saw a flicker of something in Mark's eyes. It was like watching ice begin to thaw under the first warm rays of spring. Mark's voice, when he finally spoke, was cautious but carried a note of hope. He said he accepted their apology but expected real change going forward. In that moment, I felt a warmth spread through me, like sunshine after a long, cold winter. This unexpected meeting in my little office felt like a turning point, not just for Sebastian and Jared, but for all of us. It was a reminder that even after the deepest hurts, there's always a possibility for redemption. As I looked at these young faces around me, I saw the potential for healing and understanding. It made me think of all the times in my life when forgiveness seemed impossible, yet somehow found a way. This wasn't just about one incident anymore, it was about the kind of community we wanted to build. I realized that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to open our hearts to change. As they all left my office, I felt a sense of hope, fragile but real, like the first green shoots after a forest fire. This was just one step on a long journey, but it was an important one, leading us all towards a path of healing and mutual understanding. As I look back on this journey, I can't help but feel a sense of wonder and gratitude. Who would have thought that a painful incident could lead to such growth and healing? Our community has changed in ways I never imagined possible. Sebastian and Jared have become advocates for respect and kindness in our town. Mark has grown into a strong, compassionate young man, using his voice to stand up for others. And me? Well, I've learned that sometimes life's toughest moments can bring unexpected blessings. My little cafe has become more than just a business, it's a place where people come to connect. Folks stop by not just for coffee and pastries, but for warm conversation and smiles. Our little town feels warmer somehow, like we've all learned to look out for each other. As I watch the sunset from the cafe terrace, I feel a deep sense of peace. We've all come so far, and while the road wasn't easy, it led us to a beautiful place. I think about all the lives touched, all the hearts opened, and I smile. Sometimes, the sweetest victories are the ones we never saw coming. And as I close up the cafe, I know that tomorrow brings new opportunities to spread a little more kindness. After all, that's what life's all about, turning bitter experiences into warm memories and connections.